Life consists of moments. As one moment comes to a close, we anticipate what's next. What are you anticipating? Vintage Church, it's time to anticipate. It's time to ask, what's next? In September 2018, Vintage Church celebrated 10 years of ministry. Who could have anticipated what God would do in 10 years? From our launch in the Vintage Arts Center to the countless locations we've gathered in, God has been faithful to build, grow, and use Vintage Church. In 2015, Vintage Church set out on a God-sized vision when we launched the More Initiative, believing God for more resource for our church, more environments for our city, and more impact for our world. Through the More Initiative, we've expanded our capacity for greater ministry impact. Just over 1 year ago, Vintage Church launched our Complete the Pathway initiative, focused on discipleship, leadership development, and outreach. All of this carried out to strengthen and stabilize our church to anticipate what's next. And while Vintage Church never anticipated our founding pastor, Rob Wilton, multiplying the gospel in Pittsburgh, both Vintage Church New Orleans and Pittsburgh are thriving. The Lord has not only sustained us, but strengthened us. Here we are in this moment, anticipating what's next. Vintage Church, we are excited to anticipate together. Through the Lord's faithfulness and our collective generosity, we are anticipating future impact, future generations, and future churches. What's next? Future impact. Over the next 2 years, we desire to mobilize our church to impact our city through gospel conversations, discipleship, and Serve NOLA outreach. What's next? Future generations. Over the next 2 years, we desire to expand our generation's leadership, vision, and space to better disciple the children we have and reach more children and families. And what's next? Future churches. Over the next 2 years, we desire to spiritually, physically, and financially support our extended family of church plants, Vintage Church Pittsburgh and Dwell Church in Denver. In Genesis 22, we see an incredible story of anticipation on display. God tells Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Rather than disobey, Abraham anticipates God to provide. And guess what? He does. After God provided, Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it will be provided. Vintage Church, we are anticipating because we've seen the Lord provide and believe He will provide for what's next. Why can we anticipate what's next? Not only has the Lord been faithful, but you, Vintage Church, have been faithful. As we anticipate what's next, I want to encourage and challenge you to consider 3 things. First, pray. Pray for yourself as we enter into this new 2-year initiative. Pray for Vintage Church as we begin anticipate together. Second, go. Each day of your week, pray for the Lord to bring you opportunities to have gospel conversations. Partner with Vintage Church to serve our city. Dream of serving Pittsburgh and Denver. Third, give. Through our collective generosity, we are able to join in with what the Lord is doing. Begin considering now how you can be generous or expand your generosity to Vintage Church. Together, let's believe the Lord for future impact, future generations, and future churches. Let's anticipate what's next.